right, I am hitting record so that we have that for the community. As always on CHAOSS, we follow the code of conduct under Linux Foundation. You're free to leave your cameras on or turn them off. I think those are the usual disclaimers. I did place a link to these, the agenda and minutes inside of the chat if folks want to play along on the home game. Adrian, do you want to start with this pull request?
Yeah, actually, I think that pull request is coming out of Mose and your team, I
Yeah.
think. But it seems like we're seeing the same issue with
Yeah, I was the
contributors
one who
getting
put it
overwritten.
down because Josh Burkus pointed it out yesterday at like 8 p.m. Eastern. Because Adrian, you're like, "Hey, Callie, are we seeing this?" And I was like, "I don't know." And I saw the message and I was like, "Okay, we are."
Yeah.
Great. So I did want to talk about the fix and to talk about, okay, so how I haven't gone into this PR to know exactly how much, like, if it just fixes the issue, and if so, how do we also now go through and fix all of the contributors that now have nulls for their emails. Um, and so I don't know if this fix is just preventing it from happening again, but then how to undo the nulling of arcs. I would like to look into when and how this happened, because this has definitely not been I've done a lot of analysis from our database, and this is new. Like, this is a new problem.
Yeah.
Um,
I think there's a way to do a get blame if I go.
Yeah, we can deep dive into that probably later because that information's preserved in Git.
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Mose, do you want to kind of explain? Like, I think I've reviewed this. I feel like I have a decent understanding of it, but do you want to explain it, or do you want me to take it?
So I don't know the details of this code because it was Mahmoud looking into it. But what we are observing is that the contributor email basically, like if you look at the database and like monitor the database, you can see that the number of contributors within emails decreases over time during the data collection, which is like at the beginning they have it and then somehow it disappears. And my understanding, but again, I'm not very familiar with Augur, like we just started looking into it, is that as the data collection goes on, there are different sources where the data is coming from, and the later sources are basically overriding the first ones. So like there is a mismatch of information coming from like from Git and from GitHub, because the problem with GitHub is that you take the email from the public profile basically. For example, my account doesn't have the email in the public profile, but you can get the email of my commits. So if you first get the emails from my Git commits and then later from the GitHub public profile, you end up with nullifying my email address, basically.
Yeah.
So this is kind of what's happening, I believe. Then what's the right fix? I don't know.
So
What you're describing, I'll just say that completely checks out to me, and I would say that from somebody who has used Augur for a very long time. Hi, I'm Callie, and I a lot of times describe myself as the Augur super user. I'm not the one that's like contributing the most code, but I am usually. Congratulations, somebody has finally beat me to finding a bug. Because usually I'm the first one to run into things. But the description that you're saying checks out with how Augur does collection. I could totally see how this is happening. But I interrupted Adrian.
that's okay. And I was gonna kind of dive into like my understanding of how this is fixed too is I noticed there's a lot of use of, I think if you scroll down a bit in the diff, there's I think it uses coalesce somewhere. I think it's further down. It basically is like saying, hey, if like, or it's kind of looking at, hey, we're trying to insert this new email address,
Yeah, here
and
it
it's
is.
kind of checking like, yeah, yeah, I'm less familiar with like a super database internals of it, but I think fundamentally it's kind of checking like, is there a like it's comparing like the value that's already there and the value that you're bringing in, and like if the value you're bringing in is null and there's a value there, like it's probably going to prefer the one. Like it's basically conflict. It looks like it's kind of largely conflict resolution, like when you've got kind of multiple pieces of data trying to be in the same place. Um, and so it's updating that instead of sort of forcing the most recent update. I think it's doing some more logic with detecting null values and that kind of thing. My biggest question about this patch is why we're doing the same fix in two places. Like if you keep scrolling down, you'll see the same pair of diff changes again.
But
And
it's
so
in
I'm
a
just
different,
wondering why, like dataparse.py and lib.py versus Augur data and session.py, like why we have the same fix in two places.
I mean, I would presume we have the same bug in two places, and it's this duplicate code question that you raised yesterday,
Yeah.
Adrian. Like, I honestly, I don't know how and when
Yeah.
that happened, but I do recall the period that we were sort of refining this code. And it was quite a challenge to get there. So obviously I'm not thrilled that something seems to have broken.
One thing Callie brings up a good point in the chat too is like
Chat.
I'm sort of trying to figure out, like, I'm kind of, I'd be interested, I think, as far as trying to fix this in the best possible way. Like, I don't really have much understanding of like what the relationship is between all the different kind of contributor information places in the database, because I think it sounds like there's a contributor alias table, but then we're also
So
putting
the
contributors in
alias
other.
So the alias table, and On can correct me, pretty much it's to keep all of the different emails. Like that's supposed to be kind of one of the good things about Augur is that it keeps up with all of the emails that have ever been associated with the account. That's why I want to really make sure we're considering how that's impacted because obviously it's getting overwritten. I'd be curious to see what's happening in alias and making sure that behavior is correct all the way through to like and whenever it's working correctly, to my understanding, when a contributor is seen for the first time with their email, that's the email that gets put with the in the contributor table, and then any additional email that is hit after that gets put into the alias table. The idea being that those are all the other email aliases that is linked to the same contributor.
Yep. And that is yeah, so you're right, Callie. That is the purpose of the aliases table. And effectively it keeps a list of all of the contributor aliases in that table. That's the goal.
Yeah, I think as far as like recovering from this too, like it sounded to me initially like, oh, like if now it's being smarter about which values it puts in the database instead of just the most recent. If the most recent thing is null, accept that. Um, I originally thought it would kind of self-heal, but I think, yeah, Callie, I think you bring up a good point for longer standing instances like ours. Like this could have basically resulted in irrecoverable, just like if we
I don't know
had the
about
historic
irrecoverable,
data.
but we're gonna need to go through. I mean, what we're gonna need to do to recover all of the emails, because I mean, the emails come from like the commits and different stuff like that. Like especially with how Facade goes, it would probably just be a need to go through the commits, and that already happens every time with the with
Yeah,
Facade, anyways.
there's
Um,
sort of
it's recoverable, but I don't think it's going to be done. It logically, it does. I think there might have to be its own effort.
Yeah.
yeah, there's probably like a fixed script that would need to be run if in fact this is what's happening, and I certainly sounds like it is. In terms of the emails, in general, if a person has made a commit, we have their email, and that should never be overwritten. Like we should have that in the contributors table. For people who don't make a commit, whether or not we get their email is really a byproduct of the footprint. How many repos you're collecting? Is there another place that they made a commit that we can get their email? Will GitHub give us their email? Oftentimes they won't. There's also been a change in the GitHub API recently that's been brought to my attention regarding the events API. And I'm wondering if there may be some collateral, I don't know, for lack of a better word, damage happening to the way that we've been resolving contributors historically. I don't know that, but I have seen our contributor, in the last 2 days, I have seen errors that we've never gotten before from the events API, which is what we use to do the contributor repo table, which is kind of the snowball data gathering around the contributor, where we get GitHub actions that have been recorded for that contributor, whether they're inside repos we're collecting on or not. Those go in the contributor repo table. That API has changed, and the Augur the Augur collection needs to be fixed. I don't know how long it's been going on. I just started seeing error messages yesterday on our instance, but this is all cloud stuff, so that doesn't mean that other people didn't see it sooner.
Is there an issue for it? That sounds like a separate thing.
Yeah, I wanted to check actually with this group to see if anyone else had seen this. And let me see if I can.
I haven't really been looking, to be honest. So I would just file it, and then if I come across it, I'll probably search for the existing issue. But I think also that given the number of different directions I think we're going with this, like obviously we have to solve the problem and then figure out how it got here and figure out how we recover. This might be a good candidate for opening a discussion, like on a GitHub discussions, because we can kind of have one message for each thing and then devolve into a thread. Just like, okay, here's the issue, like here's the recovery thread, here's the like how this happened thread, who's affected kind of thing.
Yeah, I'll be really curious to see. I haven't had time to look into this because it got pointed to me like at 8 p.m. local last night of the contributor, of how this has impacted the contributor alias table. Because if it hasn't hit the contributor alias table, that is a total, like the scale of the problem is a lot smaller. But I don't know if the solution actually gets made that much smaller, because then how do you figure out which email got lost? Because in the initial form, it would be, my thought is that it would probably, if it only overwrote the contributors table, then the only like email that got written to null is the one that was in the contributors table, not the ones in the alias table. But that's assuming that the emails are being correctly added, the additional emails are getting correctly added to the alias table.
Yeah, unfortunately, so based on the Slack thread that's been going on for a little while, I think it's the alias table where this was noticed.
First,
So
okay, so it's
yeah,
just going to be a larger. So yeah, scale one, we fix the collection, and then we start to figure out, for some context, Adrian, this is not like having to have a script to go fix a bug like this is not something that is like a new process, I guess. Like
I
creating
now
a script to go fix something like this, it happens.
I now suspect that this GitHub API change may be a root cause. And I'm saying that because I've just looked at our contributor aliases table, and we have not collected a new alias since September 1st. And we, like ordinarily, we will be collecting dozens, if not hundreds of aliases every single day. So
okay.
Okay.
it does seem like something happened and we didn't know it. Mose, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to say that the other problem is that now we have a 1000 repo instance of Augur in our group, and the alias table is completely empty at the moment.
Okay. All that
Which,
is
I don't know,
fine.
maybe it's the next topic, which is like the data collection maybe is getting stuck somehow.
That would make sense though. Like if Sean, if you were noticing that the aliases have stopped collecting since a particular date, I bet that date is before Mose's instance started.
Yes, it is September 1st.
Yeah.
And I would
Yes,
point out that I only looked there because Callie and you and the thread just pointed me there. So the fact that that's not working, I would
Okay, I'll follow up on this after the meeting today. I can dive into that events API thing and see.
Yeah. I'm just going to check really quick because, it's possible this has nothing to do with that API change. And so I'm just going back and looking. Okay, September 23rd, we did a release. September 4th. So it's possible also, I suppose, that this September 4th release introduced some kind of issue, because that is profoundly adjacent to when we stopped getting that data. So I would say that this release on September 4th and the API issue. I mean, they could be just coexisting, but chances are one of them introduced this issue.
Yeah. I think I can look into it too on we can dive into it on Slack too. Maybe
Yeah,
I think we could probably, unless anyone else has anything like important to add to this, I think we could probably keep going with the agenda.
So this does feel like a bit of a 5-alarm fire for Augur.
Yeah.
So one suggestion I have, tell me what you think of it. Right now, Maine is pretty stable. I've been testing the crap out of it for about 3 weeks. Obviously, this problem exists in Maine. However, if we did a release on Maine and then merged this pull request, we would have a release branch that is up to date with all of the other fixes that have been implemented. And we can start using Maine to test this specific issue.
And then just do this as a hot fix.
Well, yes, if we could actually do it as a release, if we do the release of what's in Maine right now, then we could do this in Maine, and we may not need to have a hot fix. We may be able to just do a release when we get to this one. When we get this fixed, we could do another release, is what I'm saying. We could also do this as a hot fix and not do a release right now.
Either way, as long as the change makes it to prod, as long as a solid fix for this makes it to prod, I don't really massively care how it happens.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, being a little bit separate from it, I would say there's been so many changes. It would be good to have a release. And I don't know what number we're at, but 95.0 and then 95.1 is whenever the full fix for this problem is. I think makes sense.
Okay, so do you want to do this release process in this meeting, Adrian?
Probably
Um,
not, because I don't think we have
Okay.
time.
All right.
yeah,
Right
let's
on.
go, yeah, let's talk through
Go to the
that.
agenda.
John, we can do that kind of stuff and probably merge a bunch of this. My goal is to try and get a lot of this stuff ready so that we can merge it in the maintainers meeting tonight.
Okay, good plan. All right, next item on the agenda is large repo facade collection. Yes.
Yeah. Um, yeah, there's been some chat, Adrian. I could kind of explain what I've seen, and then Adrian can kind of take it from there. I've been monitoring this really closely, trying to see, okay, once we restart Augur, how long is it collecting? And there's pretty much been, and this is what we've been talking about for a bit, it restarts, these larger repos are getting data collection for a bit. It's actually very variable how many days. I've seen them get collection for like up to a week and then stop. But like the most recent one was only a couple of days. And so it's pretty much been where all of these longer running repos. One of the things that I've also been considering, that's a little bit different than what Adrian's been saying, is that I've been wanting to extend the amount of time, at least on our instance, of the time between facade collections. Like facade is collecting at a pretty solid rate, especially for these size of repositories, but it is not really able, it's keeping up, but barely. And so it's not even like I'm 10 days for recollection for facade for at least for me. I'm like, I think 14 would make more sense in line with core, probably give more time to just be able to focus in on these larger repositories. That's something that I have been thinking about, but that isn't super helpful in diagnosing the cause. I'll pass it over to Adrian because he's kind of taken it over from here for our instance and investigating things.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm still, as far as the core facade collection thing, I'm still not 100% sure what the root cause of why it's kind of locking up. I think our initial idea was something about Rabbit getting a network issue and forgetting about jobs. I'm also trying to see if I can kind of optimize how our cloud instance is set up as far as, because I think I think we're kind of seeing a fair amount of like, we're putting in so many queries into Postgres, but they're getting kind of bottlenecked by disk IO. So I'm not sure if that could be a factor. But I think definitely like following on some of my changes recently for just trying to generally update config, like make things more configurable, like config files over hard-coded stuff in the code. I think that kind of stuff and like what Kelly said, being able to allow whoever's running the instance to be able to just easily change like how often recollection happens and how many workers are in each job and all that. Like I think that's just generally going to be helpful with just diagnosing this and being able to tweak things kind of more on the fly. Um, so that's still kind of, I think in general that facade kind of performance and locking up is still kind of being investigated, but slow progress I think is being made. Does anyone else have comments on facade? Mosaic, are you guys seeing this still in your instance?
Yeah, I think so. So in the status table, I can see that it's all good, but again, the contributor aliases table is empty. And also, is there a way to like manually kick a task, like a collection task?
I think that's something that is an issue that I think Callie's raised before of like, hey, can we have some more kind of control over like, hey, can we kill this task? I think the way Callie does it
Kill
mostly is
9
just, yeah, you just
in
find
the
the process
terminal.
ID in Flower and like kill 9 or whatever. Um, having a better way to do that might be helpful though. Um, but I think yeah, this is kind of I think I kind of see this as a little bit. This is kind of a I think separate issue from the contributor aliases. Um, but yeah, um, these two issues again. These are basically the kind
Yeah.
of my top focuses. So anyone's got any information on either of these, and let me know.
Yeah, I think some good context for people who aren't running like super large instances. Like our instance has close to 40,000 repositories in it. And this issue of the larger repositories is impacting about 15. These are repositories that have most of the time over 100,000 commits. And Augur isn't able to get right now to once it's getting to those higher numbers, it's not getting there, and then it's for some reason it's getting stopped. But for our table, it's only 15 out of about 40,000.
So actually, one observation I made a little while ago too that might be related to the facade stuff. So I think on my local just laptop instance, I think I had turned debug mode on, like debug logging on just to debug some stuff. And I think I noticed like once it started running, like I was like it prints a log line for every commit that it gets through and analyze commits in parallel, which is part of facade. And when it first started, I was seeing like it was filling up my whole terminal page with those lines and they were all within the same second. And
Yep.
then I checked back a little later and I was like, oh, I'm now seeing sort of 1 or 2 seconds worth. Like there was fewer commits being analyzed each second. And so I was sort of like, even as they scrolled by really rapidly, I was kind of seeing like, oh, I can see more seconds worth of logs in this fixed sort of window. Um, and so I just was starting to throw log lines into CSV files and just like throw together a quick little just spreadsheet analysis of it. So I almost wonder too if we have some sort of like big like so sort of optimization problems just at scale with how we're analyzing
Yeah,
or just multiple of them going at once, sort of slowing it all down or something like so some performance issue like that could potentially be kind of it starts off really fast and then slows and slows and slows until it's like barely doing anything.
so I think you are onto something there. And talking about facade, both facade and really every other collection task will hit the contributors table, at least to check to see if that contributor is already in there. And so the contributors table and we've talked about this before, Adrian, the commit messages table, they have, when I run only facade and I have core and secondary turned off, I'm running at about an average of about 80 blocked queries at a time, but it continuously rotates through them pretty rapidly. When I'm running core, secondary, and facade, I'm in the neighborhood on my instance of about 220. So more than double, almost triple. Just database queries that are blocked, and those are mostly insert queries, and they're blocked around contributors and they're blocked around commit messages. And so I know we asked Isaac a few weeks ago to see if he could figure out how to turn off commit message collection, because I'm wondering if that is one of the origins of the slowdown that you're seeing. I do.
Also, I noticed, so I don't know if you guys saw the issue I filed very recently about table bloat, but I noticed, I noticed the other day, this was kind of a side tangent, but I noticed on our instance, I just set up sort of host system monitoring on our Grafana stack. And so I noticed that there was a lot of just IO wait stuff. Like there was obviously a lot of bottlenecks on IO. And I was just throwing stuff at generative AI to just see like, hey, are there any easy fixes we can make? And it mentioned sort of Postgres bloat. Like when you delete something in Postgres, it just gets marked for deletion, doesn't actually get removed from disk. And so you might be querying only a gig of data, but it might, because if you have a lot of deletes that haven't been kind of cleaned up by Postgres automatic processes yet, you might be transferring 5 gigs of data only to have the 1 gig you care about. And so we basically on our instance, we kind of shut it down and just did a full Postgres vacuum. And then I noticed within a couple days, the bloat on basically those 3 tables I mentioned in the issue were back up to over 60, 70, 80, 90%.
Which do you know
And
the issue? I'm trying to find
3343 is the issue number.
Thank you.
It's an issue, not a pull request. You're on the pull requests tab.
Am I? Oh my God. Thank you for noticing that.
But it's the 3 tables I see that they're both, I mean, there's other tables with more bloat, but they're really small tables. But the big tables with high bloat are pull request reviews, commit messages, and contributors. So I think that's also like whatever contention is causing our issues with facade is probably also causing so much contention that auto vacuum can't happen, and those tables are being very bloated. So I think we've got like 3 or 4 issues that I think are quite related to each other.
Yeah,
There.
and then
So-
I put this into chat. We're going to be talking to Josh Burkus today. Like, I mean, Josh has been kind of like tangentially involved. If for people who are not familiar, Josh Burkus is also another person in Red Hat's OSPO, but in his past was one of the co-creators of Postgres, so he knows a lot about these things. And so we're going to kind of get probably a round of recommendations, kind of similar to what we've done in the past, Sean. And so um, we'll report back.
Yeah, I mean, Josh has done so much for this. Josh and your John Strunk guy have done so much for the Augur project just by giving us advice from time to time. And in John Strunk's case, the Docker stuff that he did over the summer is just beyond fantastic. So that's awesome. I'm really happy to hear that that's happening, because that kind of help would be very, very welcome, I think, by all of us right now.
Yep. And so we'll get all those notes down. It's also helpful because Josh is now doing some of his own analysis based off of our database. And so just from using, I mean, he just kind of getting some feedback through that will be helpful. And we should know more about this is like ominous positive, the future of our direct team in the next couple of weeks.
Just clarifying, just Sean, I think the bloat is more of a symptom than a cause, but I think whatever the
Yeah.
root cause is, it's causing all of the symptoms of facade and that. So
Yes, I agree. I think yes, I think the bloating is happening. You're right. And I don't know. That's why I linked the issue, because I didn't
yeah.
want to restate everything. But these 3 tables being bloated, I think you're 100% right that this is an indication of the contention that is causing some of the other issues. And so I was trying to think of how we might pick off pieces of the problem on the Augur side. And I think if we can turn off commit messages and test Moset's PR, we may not be all the way there, but I think that would be significant progress and possibly eliminate one of these issues. Probably not both of them, but possibly one of them. I don't know which one either. Does that make sense, Adrian and Kelly, Moset?
Yep, I think if there's easy fixes, if there's easy ways to kind of turn stuff off, we can try it. But I'm again, I think like Callie mentioned, I'm gonna be in a meeting with Josh and Callie and stuff later today. So I'm gonna probably try and get kind of his thoughts on that. And I'll probably be turning those into some kind of PR or something like that pretty soon, hopefully. So, I mean, if there's an easy like toggle already there, go for it. But I mean, it seems like these tables are so heavily used by so many parts of Augur that it might be harder to test in isolation, other than like you said, maybe just running the instance facade only, which is
Yeah,
again kind of tying back to some of the config changes that Callie was suggesting. Like, hey, maybe if we can change the number of jobs for each thing, you could just do facade 25 jobs, everything else 0. Um, so yeah, it's just a lot of things kind of waiting on other things. So it's just trying to get things through like in ways that make sense.
all right. So backing off the frequency of facade collection is another thing that we discussed in the context of one of these two issues. So I just put that in the notable action item list. And this is really only to ensure that my memory, it sustains itself between now and tonight.
And I just want to make, and on the commits, as like the commits message, as long as it's just a temporary pause and not like a long term, because I do know that within our OSPO, the commits, right now the commit messages aren't like a huge deal, but I have a feeling that they're going to be in the near future, depending on how much the adoption of noting in your commit messages of AI usage becomes.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the only solution that people have come up with for identifying AI contributions. That's kind of the only actual real suggestion that's been done, and I have a feeling that we are going to be asked to measure that in 2026.
Yeah, that the reason it's in there is because people have wanted to measure it. And in fact, the research work that I'm doing around AI and open source is one of the reasons that commit messages table got created like in April, I think, because the commit messages are the most common place for people to indicate they have or have not used AI. And so we needed them for that purpose. And I expect a lot of organizations are going to have that curiosity. So I think you're right that it's going to become increasingly important, not only for Red Hat, but for the world.
Yep.
So one thing that I would ask that you ask Josh, since you have his ear today, is one of the ways that, well, the way that Augur ensures the integrity of the data that we're collecting is that everything that is a parent table has a foreign key to the child table. So for example, in the case of the commit messages, there's a foreign key on that to the commits table. And that ensures that we don't get commit messages that are not associated with a commit. And that ensures that we have integrity across the database. And I wonder whether or not that foreign key could be a component in the bloat, like that's I guess mention that that Augur is.
Can you type this out?
Yes,
Just
yes,
yeah, just
yes,
type
yes,
it out.
yes. Yeah.
I
That's
took
gonna
a
be
brief
long.
note as well, but having a alternate version of it would be helpful too.
Um, Sweet. As a side note, Mose, are you planning on going to FOSDEM by any chance? I'm just kind of, or FOSDEM / CHAOSScon EU, because if not, you should consider it.
Sorry, second.
FOSDEM, are you familiar with FOSDEM?
No.
You should look into it. If you're starting to like look at doing like a university OSPO, or that FOSDEM is a pretty much it's probably the
Okay, yes,
largest.
yes, yes,
Oh
yes.
yeah, FOSDEM, it's a huge open source conference, but almost
Yeah.
more importantly, practically every community has a co-located event, including CHAOSS. And so it's just a really big area to where people are coming together. CHAOSScon has submissions open for people that they want to talk about our work. It's also in probably future meetings worth us talking about what we might want to do from like an Augur standpoint. Like if we want to have like a in-person like a hackathon. I hate the term hackathon personally, but like if we want to have like some setup time for all the main users and contributors of Augur to talk and work on stuff, those are things that we should probably be considering around now. whether that's with CHAOSScon or along CHAOSScon.
Okay, yes, thanks.
So, okay, I was actually wrong. The foreign key is not on the hash, it's just on the repo ID. So we decided to try to keep that lighter, but it could still be a factor in some of these things because there's a cost. And since Augur is doing so much insertion and updating, these foreign keys may be, I think they may be a factor, and Josh may know ways
Yeah.
that could be fixed.
Sounds good. Yeah, I got notes. I got my note for that, and I'll try to remember to grab this from yours as well.
So code duplication, moving on to that.
I was gonna say for the sake of time, we can probably defer code duplication and releases discussion for the maintainers meeting tonight. I'm not sure what the scroll through chat PRs is.
I mean, we don't have to do this right now. This was just that there's been so many different conversations and PRs and issues, and if we had time, I wanted to go through it, but I actually would defer to talking about code duplication. Even I guess maybe that's more of a maintainers talk, but I do think it's a pretty big topic. Of kind of curious to hear Sean's perspective if there's like a reason, like if like there's a place where that because this is not it's not just this PR, like there's been like if we're looking at the number of like setting the collection days, we saw that there was like variables being assigned in a couple of spots and different things of trying to figure out if there has ever been if there's a deliberate reason behind any of this or if this is just tech debt that we need to clear out.
I think that specifically referring to what appears to be what very clearly almost certainly is code duplication between the session and the lib, the DB lib files.
Yeah, you can also if you open up the issue that Adrian there's like
I just put it in the meeting notes. It's 3345. I linked a couple of places I've seen it. Just quickly, those two issues, I think it was where it's brought up. But I suspect it sounds to me like it's more of because I know there was I've seen a few things too where it's like, oh, this was legacy facade. I think I have a commit somewhere locally that just removes an entirely duplicate set of sort of the queries that check how like what needs to be recollected on. Like I found some like three functions in some util file that weren't being used anywhere. So I'm part of me wonders if this is just like, hey, we had legacy facade, we kind of migrated, like we kind of rebuilt facade, but the legacy thing stuck around or something like that. So,
I think in that specific case for these issues, it's technical debt from when we were refining the contributor resolution because we explored a number of different paths and it seems like I suspect one of these two pieces of code that's duplicated is mostly not used or not used at all. And we just need to try to figure that out to remove the technical debt, honestly.
okay.
That's what I think. That, having the oral history of Augur.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll do a film sometime about the oral history of Augur.
That'd be probably a useful documentation resource.
Yeah.
Maybe this is probably not worth doing like as part of the contributor table thing, just because of how urgent that is. But like if someone's got the bandwidth to test, like if we can we like do a test with only one of the two halves of that PR and see like is one half just not like affecting like if you remove like are we able to remove half of that diff like one of those copies of that effectively that same change that's made twice um and have it still fix the issue because that would help point to which copy of the code is the unused one. But I realize that's probably it's probably as far as recovering from the 5 alarm fire, it's probably easier just to like test that, merge it, and then we can start figuring out which one was the dead code. Um, so either way is fine, but I think like that might also help us sort of triage the code duplication. Um,
And I now realize that this item should be up above under code duplication. it's hard to participate and facilitate a meeting and at the same time take notes, but I'm doing it. Yeah, so yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. And we do have it in the Augur. Augur's GitHub configuration allows maintainers to edit PRs. So we should be able to do that in the maintainer meeting if we want to explore that.
Yeah, I mean, that might be something that is probably easier just to test locally.
For sure.
But yeah. It seems like we're kind of at time, so I don't know if we have
Yeah.
time for the. I was just going to bring a topic up from the Fedora Data Working Group. They've got a meeting that conflicts basically directly with this one, so I don't think they were able to send anyone today. But I know they're trying to build a whole data lake house and potentially integrate Augur. It's probably not worth getting super into with the like 2 minutes we have left, but
Yeah.
throwing that out there as like, hey, like if people want to start thinking, like if there are ways to integrate, like to kind of have Augur be like put something sort of put a layer in front of Augur between users and Augur to like bring like pull Augur data, but also combine it with data that is entirely out of scope for Augur into sort of one sort of data lake house, like sort of one interface for example, Fedora contributors. Ways to do that. If people have ideas, I'd be interested in that, maybe on Slack.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think if we know which, obviously Augur collects a ton of data about a lot of different things. If we know what their priority is, we could probably quite easily, and I guess if we know what form they prefer the data in, obviously Augur has a relational database. I suspect for a data lake, they may prefer it extracted in some other format, which we can do if we know what that format is and which data they want to target first.
Yeah,
I'll
it's, I mean,
probably know more. And yeah, what's gonna be of this Fedora collaboration, I think is gonna take form through the end of the year. So
Yeah,
uh,
so
yeah, not urgent, just
Adrian's right. That does get us to time.
well, yeah, thank you guys for the discussion. This is definitely
yeah,
hopefully making progress on the big stuff, and then
Mose, I really appreciate all of your contributions, and
yeah,
Adrian,
it's been
you know,
fantastic.
well, your whole team too. Yeah.
yeah.
Thanks for the help.
Yeah,
Yeah, no problem.
we'll get things moving. Things are going. Appreciate everyone.
All right, appreciate you all. Thank you.